courtroom feed. But as we wait, I want to go back to something that happened yesterday. So we heard a lot of forensic cell phone evidence yesterday, but at one point there were arguments over certain data that the defense didn't find permissible. So to kind of get you a better idea of what that was all about, let's take a little listen about the arguments from yesterday.
Also, a lot of the information contained there is hearsay. They said, well, it's his phone, so there's no hearsay objection. There are texts between people. There's also evidence that we have that establishes that that phone was being used. The phone comes up as the name Sack Chaser Howard. Sack Chaser is the nickname of one of the decedents. That phone is used interchangeably so much that when you dial with it, it comes up with one of the decedents' name as the identifier. It's in the name of Jamie King, not Jamel Demons. It was retrieved from Jameson Francois, not Jamel Demons. So it's neither in his name, it wasn't retrieved from him, and it comes up with an ID. It was being used after the defendant was arrested. We have information here that indicates that, definitively. It shows the phone being used to call. It shows the same step data from that very unit after he is incarcerated. So it's obvious that it's being used by several other people. So we can't even say that it's his phone and the information there is therefore all relevance, all information on it is non-hearsay because it's statements of the defendant. Not only is it being used by others to text, to call, being carried by others, it's in somebody else's name, retrieved from someone else, and this witness has not analyzed a single letter of all the information they're seeking to put in. So there is a ton of irrelevant evidence that is being introduced, and a lot of it is going to be prejudicial, 404B and 403 evidence. And that's why we objected before.
The phone was located, it was taken from the defendant's manager on February of 2019. The defendant was providing the passcode and information via jail calls to his manager to use it on that. And the phone also authenticates itself in terms of every single photo that is on that, whether it be a selfie, a screenshot of a FaceTime conversation, or anything of that, goes back to this defendant.
Okay, let's break this down a little bit. I'm joined right now by law enforcement instructor Sonny Slaughter, along with criminal defense attorney and civil rights attorney Tyler Bailey. Great lineup. Look at my guest this morning. Fantastic. It's great to have you both here. Sonny, I'm going to start with you because here's the big takeaway from yesterday, in my opinion, right? Is that you didn't really hear anything about what this cell phone contents were, or even if it's directly tied to YNW Melly. It seems to me that there is a cell phone that could have been used by him, but might have been circulated by multiple people. Do you get the same sense there?
And that's exactly what I was thinking. I was wondering, is this like a community phone? What relevance does it have to the particular incident? Is there some information that the prosecution can tie directly to this incident that says that these individuals committed this crime, or there was some kind of conversation, and because the cell phone was used and the data that that the defense is talking about has to do with information that happened after he was arrested and incarcerated, even though he had the PIN number to open the phone, it's all questionable and speculative when you look at what they're asking for and what they're trying to do with it. I think we need to stay closer to the date of the incident, what happened, and if there's anything that they can tie to this particular crime being planned out specifically.
Yeah, Tyler, let me throw it to you, right? So as we were just saying, the state wants to use this cell phone data from a phone that was still in use after the defendant was arrested. Doesn't make sense. Is it his or not? I mean, that seems like a pretty good basis for an argument from the defense, who, by the way, has been of the opinion that this investigation was botched and that law enforcement had tunnel vision and only focused on YNW Melly because he's famous. What's your take on it?
Well, first addressing the issue with the cell phone, I mean, the stakes are very high for the defense here. YNW Melly's life is technically on the line. I think the state considering the death penalty, at the bare minimum, he would do life in jail. to admit this cell phone evidence when there's a lot of fingers pointing to others using this phone, even when he was in jail. Although he has a PIN number, I think the stakes are really too high for them to allow the cell phone evidence when it's highly prejudicial to Melly, and there's a lot of evidence pointing to others using the phone. In addition, defense lawyers, you have to zone in on biased law enforcement. When you're somebody like a star, like the defendant is here, it makes sense to paint a picture that the state has zeroed in on him for the jump, that he is guilty. Listen to his songs and look at his demeanor. I think the state is kind of leaning on those things, but this evidence with the cell phone is really too unreliable, highly prejudicial, and hopefully the judge does the right thing. But if not, this is definitely an issue for appeal.
Well, let's talk about what the judge
they'll
did.
use in the future.
Yeah, and let's talk about what the judge did. The judge ultimately denied the defense's motion to leave this data out, but let's listen to his reasoning.
My thought is this, counsel. It's not fair to basically give me an inch worth of things to read, cases to read, articles to read, saying it's not the methodology is and basically a Daubert issue on it. It's not clear. It's not been established. All those types of things that should have been done pre-trial. I haven't seen what's on the account. I don't disagree with that. Counsel's telling me it's relevant because of X, Y, and Z there. You're saying it's not, but I don't know what is the 403 analysis, what's more prejudicial and probative. I haven't seen anything about that. I don't know what it is. I haven't seen it. You haven't made me aware of it. You're just saying it's something's more prejudicial than probative. If it is, I'm more than happy to go through one at a time with you and find out. But as far as who used the phone, what was it being done, counsel's saying it's relevant to establish his phone. So I've made my ruling. You've made your objection. So everybody knows where they stand on it.
All right, Sonny, I'll start with you. You agree with the judge?
Yes, I do. I think until they can connect the dots, this case is really about connecting the dots and not being all over the place. This is the reason why law enforcement investigative processes, along with the prosecution team, really matter. Making sure that they're not flying all over the place and that they have a straight line through with a conversation and a narrative that not only makes sense, but that is full of investigative and probative value to the jury, because that's what the jury is going to be looking at. What makes sense, what matters, and did they tie everything together? And in this particular incident, I don't think they have.
All right, going to turn over to you, Tyler. What do you think?
Well, I think the judge made a fair call. He noted the objection. The defense made their argument. At the end of the day, I think it gives the defense something to argue on appeal. Things don't go well for them at the trial court level if he's found guilty. I understand the judge's reasoning, saying that he does not necessarily know what's on the cell phone. At this point, they're just trying to keep the cell phone evidence out altogether. I'm sure they'll raise an objection when this evidence is offered to the jury, and they'll preserve it for the record.
Yeah, that's a big point, because we talked about it yesterday, too, how the defense lost their motion for a mistrial when it came to the testimony of Felicia Holmes, who was the defendant's ex-girlfriend's mother, and some questionable testimony that came in that the jury heard. The defense said that this was improper. The jury shouldn't have heard this. The judge denied that motion for a mistrial. But again, if their client is ultimately convicted on appeal, they can raise that issue. That is preserved on the record. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're waiting to jump live in this courtroom for a continuation of the YNW Melly trial. Stay with us. back, everybody. Thanks for coming back to our coverage of the YNW Melly double murder trial here on Law and Crime. Today is going to be day 6 of the trial against Jamel Demons, who faces 2 counts of first-degree murder in the shooting deaths of his 2 friends. Proceedings should be starting up any minute now. I'm keeping a careful eye on that courtroom feed. But in the meantime, we're going to go to the Broward County Courthouse because we have a very special guest. We want to introduce our boots on the ground, who is right outside of that courthouse, Law and Crime's very own Terry Austin. Good morning, Terry. Actually, I don't know if you're inside or outside the courthouse right now, but what's the atmosphere like?
Well, today we are inside the courthouse, right down from the courtroom, and it is really a little bit quiet right now. They haven't started up. I did see the witness from yesterday. That's FBI Special Agent Brendan Collins. He got on the stand yesterday. He's from the CAST unit, which stands for the Cellular Analysis Survey Team, and he just talked about his background information. He's going to get back up on that stand today. I will tell you that yesterday it was fairly intense. The jury was paying very close attention to these forensic analysis experts. Although they did not do much analysis, they did mostly just the collection and extraction. So we'll see what happens today with the FBI agent.
That's a little surprising to me. I thought that when you hear this kind of data, the jury might zone out a little bit, but it's good to hear that they're paying attention to it, because if you talk about yesterday, we talked about this before, excuse me, we heard a lot of the cell phone data evidence, and at one point the defense argued that that certain data shouldn't be permitted into evidence because one of the reasons was that multiple people had access to the iPhone even after the defendant, Mr. Demons, was incarcerated. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I know that there were 2 experts who were on the stand. Susan Johnson, she extracted the cellular data, and I do think that the defense was objecting because there were people who had custody and control of those cell phones, and it wasn't easy to authenticate that information. Plus the fact that she didn't analyze it at all, and on cross-examination, we did hear her say all she did was collect the data. And the exact same thing happened, Jesse, to the second witness who collected information. He collected that health data, and the objection from the defense as far as that was concerned is this information is not trustworthy.
We all ready to proceed?
If we could just approach briefly, Your Honor, I'd like to bring things to the court's attention.
I know I took one of the I get that back. Please. This is usual to me. Talking to my family, friends. I'll double check. I don't
I don't think counsel was suspicious that the attorneys had anything to do with that. I don't know if that was you asking me to do it, so I appreciate it.
I certainly will.
And Sigmund Garrett, come over. Can you make sure that school concerned about some leave for rent?
I'll call the sergeant.
Maybe a little less, maybe a little more.
So you're thinking you're to close your case, today's the, what, the 21st now? So the way I understand it is, and Brad has suggested that she mentioned it before, I don't remember it, there was some type of witness issue that you had with the witness, and was acknowledging that that's the case. So there's some agreement that we have, you would be in session a week of July 3rd. I just don't, I'm sure you told me that it's been right now. I would just say that, and you'd be starting your case on July 10th. Is that right? That we understand?
Yes, sir.
And so what do you want to tell the jury? Just that the state end up, I don't want to say you're on your case. I'll just let them know again when I'm in session that week, the first week of July, July 3rd, or excuse me, July 4th, July 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, we're not going to be in session. Something like that.
As that after she finishes her direct, if we
I
could
can't hear you, I'm sorry.
sorry, if after she finishes the direct, if we could have a brief break so I can set up with the computer. All right, okay, thanks, Judge.
When Mr. Adelstein comes back, there's just one issue I want to raise.
I'm sorry.
May we approach very briefly? There's no family members outside, but I asked the officers to start coming, just sit. And I need to go outside and find something that want to go get it over. Good.
You want to break some of them, Mr. Hart?
Yes, Your Honor. It needed to be Tyler, but the state just advised. If the court recalls yesterday, I was inquiring with the witness whether or not Miramar Police Department had any other software to test the results of their Celebrite download on. He said no, wasn't done. The state advised me half an hour ago that there was another one done on another software in June of this year. which the state did not disclose, purportedly because we asked for discovery to be closed, even though the state opposed the closing of the discovery and the court denied closing discovery. Nonetheless, the state indicates that it failed to meet that discovery obligation because we were asking to close discovery, but wants now to introduce through another witness the fact that another analysis was done in June of this year. And we would object to that admission based upon the discovery violation and the ambush that would ensue.
So you're alleging there's a discovery violation, so you allege that I need to do riches in here and just find out whether what you're saying is true and not true, and whether it's inadvertent or intentional, and make some decisions. You heard what the council suggested, so what are you telling me?
Yes. So Your Honor, in terms of there was an additional evaluation that was done, this was done, and the only reason why it's even coming up is because of counsel's questioning. So based on counsel's questioning and asking if there was additional or other ways to prove it, a different witness, Detective Melly, did a second analysis of the cell phone. Because at the time when Detective Zeller had it and did this, they did not have an additional software program called Reiki. Miramar Police has then subsequently obtained the license for Reiki. So the state's position is that based on questioning by defense, the state then would instruct the witness to go and do an additional download of the phone on that. So that was done in June of 2023. On that, the phone and everything is the same. And the only difference is there's additional location data that is on the new download that was not on the prior download. So there's any more information on that. None of that is exculpatory. We're just going to say that the defendant was not at the scene of the homicide and not there on that. The state doesn't have it in my possession yet. My understanding is it will be dropped off later this afternoon.
So is it fair to say then that defense requested whatever downloads there were, and a download, the Celebrite download, was turned over to them?
Yes.
The first one?
Yes.
But there had been a second download done, and that download was not sent to them?
It's not yet even been turned over to the state. I'm waiting for it from the detective. He's going to be bringing it later this afternoon.
Okay, and when did this second happen?
That would have been about a week or 2 weeks ago. I'd have to double check on the date. Again, I haven't seen it for the exact time.
So subsequent to the trial starting, you still were having downloads done?
In terms of if there was any other information, anything that was exculpatory, then I'd have to make sure that that was fully explored and turn that over to defense.
And so that has been turned over to them, so the defense doesn't know anything about it. Mm-hmm. And then defense counsel asks questions about other possible programs that they might have had, because he doesn't know if there are any or not. And the witness, Zeller,
Yes.
answers that they don't have it. And so something that he doesn't know, that prior to his testifying, you've already run a second program through a different detective already on a different system.
Yes, so the defense didn't depose Detective Zeller, because then they could have asked questions such as, does Miramar now have additional software that this could be done on? So they chose not to do so on that.
Question comes back to is when this second download was done on different software, that was just 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
When did you found out about it?
I still don't have a copy of it. I was talking with the detective last night on it in terms of the download being done. I'd have to look and see exactly on the date and if it would be communicated to me about the results.
And who asked for the download to be done?
It was discussed with the detective in the pre-trials as to if there was any other information, if there was any updates to the Celebrate program, as Detective Zeller testified to, that sometimes downloads are redone once there is updates to the software.
So this is new information that Detective Zeller doesn't know about,
Correct.
and Detective Moretti hasn't been told about.
Correct.
And it's something that's new to you that you just came up with, and your pre-trial, how long ago was that?
I have to look on the exact date on when that was.
Yeah, tell me what the date
Sometime
was.
the week, I believe, of May 21st or 23rd, sometime at that, during the course of that week. As to when the actual analysis was done, I couldn't tell you right now, because I don't have it yet. But, this is analogous to, for example, if defense were to cross-examine a witness about evidence that was tested or not tested. If they open that door, then the state would be able to go forth and send additional items for testing on that.
And to your knowledge, there's no cutoff on this record.
Correct.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yes, Your Honor. There were two questions that the court just asked the state, which I noticed were not answered. The first was, who asked for it to be done? The second was, when did you, Ms. Bradley, find out that it was done? Neither question was directly answered. Both answers were evasive. If I asked a question that precipitated the state going and doing further investigation, one, we again keep arguing that that is an ambush that affects the fairness of the trial, and that's why there needs to be a discovery cutoff. But also, that's not what occurred here. The state's discovery obligation is triggered by the rules, not by questions I put to a witness during trial. So if the state was aware of the existence of the fact that another download was done, whether the report was not, and that we are in trial, and then puts a witness on the stand to say, well, we're going to turn it over to you now because you asked a question, I don't think is a good faith response. One, we need a discovery cutoff, and we need one to be put in place now so that this propensity for ambush is not innate. Also, that's not the case in this instance. There was an analysis done. Ms. Bradley knew about it. She knew of her obligation to turn it over. She didn't turn over the fact that it was done, nor did she turn over the report. Apparently the report she is now claiming has not yet been finalized. If the analysis was done, it's a download. If the download was done, then the material from that download exists. This isn't a test that's done. It's a download. So if this download was done a few weeks ago, that is the material that should be turned over. And it was not. And we would object to any reference to it. And the defense team is going to discuss what other, we'd also for the court to inquire of the state if there's any other discovery out there about which they know to exist and have not turned over. And we're going to discuss whether or not we're going to seek any further relief, but we would ask that the state be prohibited from engaging in this ambush. They've had it for over a month now?
No, it's in course. So I think I have to look at the notes on that and answer on, so if Your Honor wants me to respond on those, I can go and check exact dates on emails.
That's fine. You can check the dates and that type of thing. Right now, I'm deferring ruling on it. Detective Moretti's not anticipated to testify today, is he?
No.
So we'll talk about that later in the day.
Sure.
Okay?
Your Honor, we also move for a discovery cutoff.
Understood. I heard it. I defer ruling on it. All right.
Thank you.
Let's bring the jury in, please.
If we could have the witness resume his seat.
Sure. Bring the jury in.
There's no family.
They'll take care of it.
Jury entering.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Please be seated. The record once again reflects the presence of the defendant, Devins, and the counsel and assistant state attorney, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Our witness, Special Agent Collins, remains on the stand. Good morning, sir. Please have a seat. Just want to remind you, you remain under oath. Please, Collins. Ladies and gentlemen, I did get a question, just discussing with the attorneys regarding the scheduling, and my understanding from speaking with the attorneys is that they anticipate the trial would conclude before the end of July. Trial is a fluid process. You don't always know exactly what the next witness is or who the witness is going to be. Can you hear me?
So how they working?
I apologize. So let me start over. I received a question about when the schedule of the trial, it's anticipated to conclude. I spoke with the attorneys. They advised me they believe the trial would be over before the end of July. I want to remind you also that because the attorneys reminded me, I forgot that there's the week of July 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. That week we're not going to be in session. We'll finish out the end of June and then pick it up again on July 10th. The week commencing Monday, July 3rd, we're not going to be in session. But the attorneys think the trial will conclude by the end of July. All right? So, ladies and gentlemen, when we were last here, Special Agent Collins was on the stand as a witness. He remains under oath. And counsel, you want to finish with your direct examination?
Yes, Your Honor, if I may.
Thank you. You may.
Okay, Detective Collins, we had just discussed about your training and experience, so remind the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in what field do you work?
I'm testifying here today in my role as a CAST asset, so cellular analysis survey team, a group that specializes in historic cell site analysis and device location analysis.
And have you used historical records to locate fugitives and missing persons before?
Yes.
Did you conduct historical cell site analysis in this case?
Yes.
Okay. Did you prepare demonstratives to help show and explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what your analysis is and how it is completed?
Yes.
Okay. I want to start with and go over the cell site records. Are those records provided to you?
Yes.
Okay. And so what's been previously admitted into evidence as states 63 and 64. starting with State 63. I'm going to open up some of the records, and if you would be so kind to follow along. So starting with what is in State 63, going to the tracking number 2058127. And so it's clear. I want to also publish State 28. This phone number 772-713-9807. Is that one of the phone records that you analyzed in this case?
Yes.
Okay. And States 28 is a pawn slip. Have you ever seen that one before?
No, I haven't.
So going back to the same phone number, 772-713-9807. Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what we're looking at in these phone records?
Sure. So this is a report from T-Mobile. It's an engineering report, and you may also hear it as referred to as a true caller quantum data or timing advanced data. But essentially what this is it's records of, from the network's perspective, location where the phone likely was during particular times. So you'll see a series of columns on here. At the top it explains what is contained in each column, and then you'll have a series of entries. All that is associated with a particular time. So column A in this case is end latitude, and column B is ending longitude. It says what the confidence level is, the IMSI, column E, and the IMEI. Those are numbers that are assigned to the device. So the IMSI is sort of like your SIM card. It's a subscriber number that authenticates on the network, so that when you have a cell phone communicating with the network knows that your customer is paid, and then they can give you network resources. The IMEI is about the device that you have in your hand.
It's been a little while since geography, so could you please explain what latitude and longitude are?
Yeah, those are coordinates on the Earth. So if you wanted to know where a particular person was at a certain point in time, or whatever, like those latitude and longitude coordinates correspond to a specific spot on the Earth. So we could plot those in any mapping software. Like we could copy and paste this in Google Maps right now, and it would drop a pin in Google Maps, for instance, and say, okay, that's where latitude 25.984685, longitude minus 80.375979 is here.
And is that what you use to do your analysis, just those latitude and longitude?
No, I use other information on this sheet.
So you talked about the IMSI, IMEI, and so I'm going to go scroll over, and just if you could explain. So the next column is, so we said roaming group, I think model and make would be the next columns that for you to explain.
Yeah, so the roaming group, it's T-Mobile records, the phone that records apply to, you can see the model and make. It's an Apple phone, it's an iPhone 10. We'll skip to column. You can see in column K, it will say what type of record this is for. So data, which would be whatever, some sort of internet connection, whether you're using email or social media, or it will say voice and data. Voice is obviously for making like a voice call.
Okay, so going down to row 91, is that an example of the voice and data?
Yes.
Okay. Make it a little bit bigger. Zoom in so it's easier to see for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Okay, continuing up at the top again so that you can explain the columns. Which specific column are you looking at when you are analyzing these records and the data in that?
So usually one of the most important ones is the time and the date, and that's column F, because often when you're doing a case, and in this specific case, I was asked, are the records consistent with certain things that the detectives had wanted to know based on the investigation that they had done separately. So you need the time and date.
And it's, when you're looking at this time and date, what is that telling you?
The time of the record.
Okay.
So when, like, column, or excuse me, row 2, when you see October 26, 2018 at midnight 000, you will know that the latitude, longitude points attributed to that in columns A and B, or a little further down the spreadsheet, we'll see that a distance measurement from the tower that is associated with that particular date and time.
So with regards to the date and time, do you have to take into account if the records are kept in Eastern Time or UTC?
These are in local time, so Eastern Time.
So the time that's on here is the time that the event happened here in whatever location it's plotted in?
Yes.
Okay. So going forward, continuing across, and then which column, you talked about distance from the tower, which column are we looking at for there?
So you'll see in, if you scroll a little further, S&T, you'll see cell site and so start cell, start eNode B. eNode B is another name for cell site, like 4G technology for cellular providers. So depending on what technology, whether it's 3G, 4G, et cetera, 5G, they call the hardware different things. It performs the same function. So that's a tower. And we will know that that tower is at a certain spot in the real world. So if I know that at a certain time, column 2, whatever that time was at midnight, the phone connected to a tower named 76963, the antenna 23, I can go find where tower 76963 is, plot that on the map and say, okay, this tower is here, and the antenna is pointed in a particular direction, and at midnight, the phone was in that direction, and then we'll see if you scroll further to the right. You'll see a distance there. So in column AO, it'll say 2.96 miles. So at that time, midnight, on October 26th, that phone was 2.96 miles from that tower.
Okay, so we've gone through a lot. I'm going to go and break it down a little bit in some of the things you talked about. You talked about 3G, 4G, 5G.
Yeah.
What is 3G, 4G?
Different technologies for, like, I guess, evolutions for the phone. Each time if there's a rollout, generally there's improvements in how well the phones work, the cellular networks work.
Okay, with regards to 3G, what type of information does that limit you to?
What do you mean?
In terms of distance from the tower, if it's a 3G tower, what type of range are you working in?
Oh, okay. Well, so that does play a factor in the certainty or we'll see in the reports later, but this timing advance is an estimated distance from the tower, right? But there's a margin of error, a margin of uncertainty associated with it. And so at 3G, for instance, you can only, the network can only say within, either depending on the type of 3G, 234 or 244 meters, what that distance is. If it's 4G, they can tell within 78 meters. They'll say, okay, this is the timing advance increment.
And in the case that we have before us today with the 772-713-9807 phone number, what types of towers and service was being used?
During the period that I reviewed and analyzed and plotted, it was exclusively 4G.
4G. So in terms of how wide is going to be your margin of error on the 4G towers?
78 meters.
78 meters. So can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury as to how that data, that distance, how that is computed?
Sure. So essentially this is it's sort of like if you think about throwing, if I had a ball and I'm playing catch with myself, throwing it off the garage, and when it comes back to me. So the cell tower will send out a burst of signal to the phone, and then the phone sends it back to the tower because the network knows when it sent the signal and when it received it back. It has an amount of time. And we know the speed that cell signal travels at, 'cause it's the speed of light. So by multiplying distance by time, or excuse me, speed by time, you get a distance.
Is the speed of light constant?
Yes.
It's been a while since physics. So you just kind of explain that a little bit to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury as to how that works.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, that's, the speed of light doesn't change. Cell signal with the speed of light anywhere in time. It's going to be the same.
Is the speed of light affected by foliage or trees or leaves or anything like that?
No, speed of light's the same.
Oh. Are cell signals or service affected by changes in environmental conditions?
Can be slight changes, but generally not. And if there's a change, we're talking about like minuscule amounts of meters, not miles.
So meters, not miles. And what types of environmental conditions would be required to have a change of those meters, not miles?
Well, if your phone is in a, like, you know, a lot of the buildings down here are built for hurricanes, so if there's lots of concrete walls, that could affect it. If the path that the signal takes to the phone is not a direct line, but say it bounces off something, like it, we call that multipath, so if it hit a glass building and then came to the phone and then went back, obviously those things would increase the time that it took for the signal to go there and come back, so that would then increase the distance.
Okay. With regards to hurricanes, is that something that would affect? Blizzards?
I mean, if the way that would affect this would be if that had a catastrophic effect on the network and then the network wasn't functioning properly.
Okay. If there are records that you are analyzing, what does that tell you about that specific tower?
That it was working.
Okay. Going on again, so you've explained a little bit about a cell tower and or a cell phone and how it works, and you mentioned cell towers. What are cell towers or antennas?
Yeah, so obviously our cell phones don't have wires coming out of them to make a call or send a text or do whatever we want on our phones. We have to connect to the cellular network. We do that through cell signal, which connects to an antenna, which is usually on a tower, and then through the network's infrastructure, the call or the data transactions routed through its core and then handle however we need to handle it. So a tower can be anything that has antennas on it.
Have you created a demonstrative exhibit to show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what a cell tower is?
Yes.
Would it help in explaining and the understanding of the testimony?
Yes.
Okay.
Judge, we're going to object before she publishes it to the jury and maybe go sidebar.
Yes. Assist the witness in explaining or illustrating his testimony. The testimony of the witness is the evidence. These demonstratives are not to be considered as evidence in the case unless they are later received in evidence, and they should not be a substitute for evidence. Only items that are actually received in evidence would go back and move to the jury room for your consideration during your deliberations. This is to assist the witness in explaining or illustrating his testimony, these demonstratives. All right, counsel, you may proceed.
Thank you. Okay, Special Agent Collins, could you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what we're looking at in this photo right here?
So this is just a generic example of what a cellular tower can be. Here you see it antenna arrays mounted on a monopole, so just a big pole that you see everyone's driven by these. And so you'll see that there's, on the image on the right, there's two triangular shapes. Each of those on each side, with each triangle shape, there's multiple pieces of equipment mounted on them. So that would be in a cell tower example that has 3 sectors or antennas pointed in 3 directions. So each of those sides that has multiple pieces of equipment, those are transmitters and receivers. Can I?
I was just about to tell you that is a touch screen, so if you touch it, you can draw on it as well.
Fantastic. So all of these would be part of one sector, one side, and all of these would be part of one sector, and all of these. So this would have 3 sides. And if you think about like what these are doing, if you wanted to imagine that it's like a flashlight, because visible light, cell signal, all part of the electromagnetic spectrum, they have the same characteristics and properties, right? So this would be like somebody standing on top of the pole with a flashlight pointed in one direction, sending light that way. And this side is a flashlight pointed in another direction. This side is light going in another direction. That way there's light or cell signal going in all directions to service, in this case, phones that are within the coverage area of the tower.
So you mentioned a little bit about the coverage area and the 3-sided. Going on to what's on page 4 of the demonstrative exhibit at this point. You explained the flashlights and things like that. Can you demonstrate again on this particular image, the sector 1, sector 2, sector 3, and why that's important?
So this would be, as we were discussing further, like it's further drilling down into what this example of a tower could be. So here again, the 3-sided tower, and you'll see that each side has a particular direction that that flashlight is pointing, that the antenna sends signal. That will be recorded in the tower list by something called an azimuth. So in the records that we'll have for the phone we were just talking about from T-Mobile, it will say the azimuth is 0. And what that means is that the flashlight is pointed 0 degrees, like out of a compass. And that will be where the coverage is the strongest, like that's the center of the beam, but it creeps out. And so it will be covered approximately 300 to 60 for 120 degrees on that side. Each side, if we have 3, would be divided up like a pie to cover 120 degrees. That way we'll have 360 degrees of coverage for the tower. Towers don't have to be 3-sided, they can be 6-sided. They can be one side that covers 360. It's up to the network engineers who build out and optimize the network, what they want to create based on what they need to. But the most common type is 3-sided tower.
Is the information as to how many sides are in any given tower something the FBI captures and takes note of?
The providers provide that to tower list.
And is that provided to the FBI?
Yes.
Is that undone and updated so it is at the time of whatever the records were created?
Correct. Yes.
Could you take those same records that you were given and look at the towers that are working today and make an analysis?
So whenever you do the analysis, you have to make sure you're using the tower list that corresponds to the time of the records because networks change over time.
Yeah. And are the azimuths, is that always part of the records that are given to you on each tower?
Yes.
When you pick up your phone and you make a call, what determines what cell tower the phone uses?
So the phone picks the tower that it's going to connect to for its initial connection. The way that does that is it, even as if anyone's got their phone with them right now, as we're sitting here not using them, the phone is still scanning the environment. It's constantly looking for signal strength and signal quality. The phone's going to identify the tower, the sector. When I say sector, I mean a tower and an antenna that offers the clearest, strongest signal. When the phone wants to make a call or send text, that is the antenna, the tower that the phone is going to reach out to. So that's very important for what I do, because that means that when the call is initiated, it's not based on the network or something. It's based on what the phone sees. It's based on what the phone sees as the tower that is the clearest and strongest signal.
Does the phone always use the closest tower?
No. The phone always uses the tower with the clearest, strongest signal. Usually, or often, that is the closest tower. However, there's other things that can determine what the clearest, strongest signal is. For instance, line of sight. If the closest tower doesn't have a clear line of sight to the device, then the phone may use a tower that's slightly further away because the signal strength and signal quality are better from the antenna with a direct line of sight, for instance.
Are all the antennas and cell towers, do they look like the ones that we showed in the previous slide?
No.
What does a cell tower look like?
Yeah, I mean, whatever the companies want them to look like, right? That's a good one because it's that I use in this because everyone can identify that as a cell tower, but I'm sure everyone has seen antennas that look like they're hidden flagpoles, antennas that are mounted on the sides of buildings, up here on the roofs of buildings. They can be small antennas that are just on top, so street lights, or they can look like anything.
In terms of the general direction that the cell tower antennas are pointed, are they at 90 degrees out, or are they angled downwards towards the majority of the phone?
Usually they are tilted down.
If you saw an example of it picking a cell tower that's further away, would you look at the records and try and determine why that's happening?
So yeah, if I see a red flag or something to me that stands out and it's being atypical, when I'm doing my analysis, usually I'll look further into it and say, okay, why is this not connecting to one of the towers that I expected it would?
So we've described the CDRs and the information that's used on those. Is that the same that you did for each and every phone in this case?
So we were looking at the timing advance report, the engineering data, the CDRs, the call detail records are a different data set.
And just explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what's the difference between the timing advance, the engineering reports, and the CDRs.
So the CDRs, or the call detail records, are records of the phone's communications, like calls, incoming, outgoing, certain types of text messages, etc. That will say date and time, the numbers involved in the call, the tower, the azimuth, etc. But it doesn't have the extra information that the engineering report does. So in the call detail records, it looks like billing records that you usually see with your phone if people actually look at their billing records. It would say tower and sector in addition to it, but it won't say distance from the tower. It won't have the latitude and longitude coordinates or all the extra information in the time advance report. The other really important thing to delineate between those two is, I just said that the phone picks the tower that it uses based on its measurements. And so the call detail records, the tower that is used is picked by the phone. It's that first connection. In the timing advance report, the engineering data, that's the network's perspective. So that's what the network is seeing behind it. And the tower that's listed in the engineering report may not be the serving cell. It may not be the tower with the clearest, strongest signal. It could be, but it could also just be another tower within the network that saw that phone and said, hey, I see you, or I see the device, it's this far away. So it's important to keep in mind what type of report you're looking at, because it obviously will affect the conclusions that you're making. So
in terms of the way you illustrate the difference between a tower being used or a sector and a timing advance, or the distance measurement on that, I want to make sure it's very clear. What we're looking at right now, what does this illustrate when we see just a round circle in your reports?
So this will illustrate the tower that the phone used, or if it's from the data report, the engineering report, the tower that is registered and listed as seeing the phone. All the green dots in the middle of this graphic, those are all cell towers, and you'll see that there's one tower in the center of the map that has a blue circle around it. So that would be the tower that the phone connected to. That's not, I think It's not like if you're using Google Maps and you're used to seeing the blue dot. When you pull that out, this is not the location device, this is the tower.
Okay, and can you just, so it's clear, point out a couple of the towers that are on this map and just highlight them so it's clear what you're talking about? Because sometimes the color doesn't come across great on the screen.
So these green dots would be other towers that weren't used or weren't, that didn't see the phone. This one here in the center of the blue circle would be the tower that was listed on the report. And then this big blue circle, that's not a coverage area, that's not saying that, hey, the phone has to be somewhere. Then here I'm just flagging that as saying that is the tower that is listed in the report. That's the tower that was used over a cell phone.
Is it your testimony that the phone is definitely within that circle somewhere?
No, definitely not.
Why not?
That's not what this is intended to do. This is just intended to show this is the tower.
Okay. So now we're going to go into the cell site. How would you indicate that in your report?
So cell site, tower and center, or tower and antenna. This is showing the direction that the flashlight is pointed. So this like wedge or a slice of pie, or however people like to think about it, that will show the direction of the flashlight's beam. So the azimuth, the center line would be, in this case, like 180 degrees due south, and then the illustration shows the estimated like ends of the coverage area. But what's really important about this is that this is just showing the direction that the antenna is pointing, the direction of the beam. So this is, again, not showing where the phone is. In other words, I'm not saying that the phone has to be within this blue shaded area. I'm not saying that the phone has to be within the arms of this black wedge. I'm saying this is the direction that the antenna is pointing.
Are you able to tell anything about the strength of a signal from a tower at any given time?
No.
Why not?
It's not reflected in the records that I have.
In terms of the average signal strength, is that something you have training and experience on from the various cellular telephone providers?
Average signal strength. No.
So is there any determination or anything that can be made about distance from a tower just based on what cell site the phone or device was using?
No. From your call detail records, you cannot tell distance.
So I want to go on to this type of illustration. If this type of illustration is used in your report, what are we looking at?
So this would be an example of the engineering data from the time of the advance report. So now we see, again, the blue wedge saying, okay, this is the sector that recorded the phone. Here's the direction that it's pointed. And then we have that distance from the sector. So the distance, whatever we can say this is, for instance, 1 mile. So a particular example would be 1 mile here. And we see that it's a certain thickness of the band because the timing advance, margin of error or size, depending on the technology, can only get down to a certain distance. So for 4G, again, it's 78 meters. For 3G, it's about 234 meters. So the size of this band will depend on the technology that you're using.
So in the records in this case, what is the width of the band in your report?
78 meters.
Okay.
So in this case, what I'd be expecting, based on the information from the phone, from the engineering report, is that the phone would be somewhere within this band, this like the curve, banana shape, whatever. That's based on the data from the engineering reports saying, okay, the phone was 1 mile from this sector, from this antenna points this direction. Here's 1 mile. The phone should be somewhere within that band.
With just one data point, can you narrow down where in that band it could be?
No.
With multiple data points, can you draw conclusions as to the location of the phone because of multiple records?
Yeah, potentially. So one way we could do that is if we had intersecting bands. If we had another tower, could you zoom out a little bit, please?
Sure.
Like let's suppose that this tower down here also recorded a measurement. Maybe that it was a certain direction and distance, and so we had bands that intersected, then we could say, like, okay, that might make the conclusion the phone is in that smaller coverage area where it's where the intersections of the bands are, we can kind of triangulate. You could also use use other information that's not related to cellular technology if there's other facts from the investigation.
Is that type of information provided to you when you're doing your analysis?
Yes.
Okay. And do you identify areas potentially of interest?
Yes.
Okay. Going on to this next slide here, what are you illustrating in this particular map?
So this shows the green dots are T-Mobile towers in the South Florida area at the time of 2018, at the time relevant to this analysis or case. And the takeaways there is just there. You see in densely populated areas, there's a much higher concentration of towers, right? Because there's more people who have more devices, so there's more demand of network resources. So the providers need to have more towers with smaller coverage areas to provide service to those devices. When you get to more rural areas where there's fewer people, fewer devices, the networks will usually have fewer towers that will have bigger coverage areas. So.
Okay. Is this map fairly and accurately depict the towers that were in South Florida in October of 2018?
Yes.
So going on to the areas of interest. If we can identify the ones that are listed here, I'm going to start with 805 Northeast 4th Avenue in Fort Lauderdale.
So that's shown in the upper right portion of the map with an orange flag and the white letters N-E on it. That was a location, all these locations were provided to me by the detective who requested I do the analysis. But that was one of the locations identified.
And how do you plot or map these locations?
With mapping software, I mean our mapping software, Google Maps.
Okay. And does that fairly and accurately depict the locations of the items of interest that were provided to you?
Yes.
Okay. So moving on, so you have a crime scene with coordinates on it.
Yes.
Is that again provided to you by the detective?
Yes.
Next, reported shooting. How would you identify that on the map and point it out, please?
So the reported shooting location is a blue flag with a little eye in it, shown here on the map, sort of, I guess, in general in the lower left.
Okay. After that, there's Memorial Hospital is your next. How is that identified on the map?
You have Memorial Hospital, 1901 Southwest 172nd Avenue, Miramar, Florida. It's shown on the map with a red square and a white H.
Okay. Next location is labeled as McDonald's. Where is that on the map?
McDonald's is 17001 Miramar Parkway, Miramar, Florida. That's shown with a red circle and a yellow M on it.
Okay. And Sunset Lakes is the next one. If you could point that out.
Sunset Lakes is located at 18513 Southwest 40th Street, Miramar, Florida. That's shown on the map with an orange flag that has the white letters S and L.
And so last but not least, the Montessori Academy.
Yes, the Montessori Academy, 19200 Pines Boulevard, Pembroke Pines, Florida. It's shown on the map with an orange flag that has the letters M and A in white.
Are those locations that we just discussed consistently plotted throughout the rest of the mapping that you do in this case?
Yes.
So I want to go to the phone number 772-713-9807 and then the phone number 954-248-9081. Do you know who either of those phone numbers belong to?
Objection. Outside of the scope of knowledge.
Excuse me.
And hearsay.
Yes, yes. Sidewalk, please.
Okay, so Council, answer the question. Do you know who any of these phone numbers belong to?
I don't know. I know the detective treated them.
Excuse me. Yes, I'm sorry.
We'll stop it right there. All you know is what somebody told you.
Right. All I know
Okay,
is-
so I don't want to get into any of that. I just want to know what your personal knowledge is. You don't have any personal investigation or knowledge as to who these phone numbers belong to?
No.
Okay. And you just know that the phone numbers that were provided to you?
Yes.
Okay, and the 772-713-9807, that's the same one that we discussed in States 28 that I published
Objection,
earlier.
Your Honor. He also testified that he never saw the document before, so it's outside his scope of knowledge.
Sustained.
Okay.
Thank you.
So with regards to the 772-713.
Objection, Your Honor. She cannot leave it up there published.
objections,
She's
Your Honor.
tainting the jury.
Just take it down, please.
Yep. So 772-713-9807, that specific phone number. On that, I want to talk in the 954-248-9081. Between 3:20 a.m. and 3:57 a.m., did you analyze the data for both of those phones?
Yes.
And if you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what this data is showing and explain it to them.
Sure. So the several slides like this in the report. So I'll talk a little bit more about this first one, just so everyone understands, which the slide says. At the top, it says the analysis of the two phone numbers that conducting analysis for. It says the time period that I'm analyzing, so October 26, 2018, 3:20 a.m. to 3:57 a.m. And then the bulk of the slide is the graphic, is the map. You see all the green dots all over the place. Those are T-Mobile towers, like we talked about before. And then you'll see that certain towers are highlighted with a circle showing that those are the towers that saw the phone. Some circles are red, some circles are blue, some circles are red with a blue perimeter around them.
And so I'm going to kind of zoom in up here on this top section, the 3:20 a.m. If you could just show some of the red with blue circles and then the blue and red on that.
Yeah, so there's an example of a red circle, and what that means is that you can call it, since it's hard sometimes to remember numbers, we'll just call it the red phone and the blue phone. So the red phone was seen by that tower, and that's why there's a red circle there. Here, the network saw the blue phone on that tower. Here's an example of a tower that it saw both.
Judge, may we approach that bar, please?
Thank you. Let the record reflect the jury stepped out. Counsel remain along with the defendant. The witness is also present. The state's present. All right. So I don't understand. You're saying you didn't have this report?
So we got this report this morning while I was sitting in the courtroom. We don't have a printer here. So I asked the state to do the professional courtesy and give me a copy of the documents that she'd be using for this testimony. I'm trying to refer to it. She gave me 7 pages, by the way, which we started, and I was objecting to it being published because it still had the names in. She said, I'm not using that first page that I handed you, I'm using every other page. So I'm looking at the pages to try to go along with what she's showing, and I'm noticing she gave me a report from a whole nother phone. All I'm asking is to give us the actual documents that she's showing the witness. And to say I emailed it to you while we were sitting in the courtroom is a little disingenuous because I don't have the printer to be able to print it out. So I just asked.
So you have the report, all 3 reports, but the reports that you have that were generated to you have the phone number as well as a name that's identified that the phone is associated with. Is that correct?
She redacted that.
No,
Yes.
but you have the 3 reports.
Yes.
Discussing the phones, and you were given those reports some time ago, and yesterday your objection was made that it's conclusory as to whose phone it was, and I sustained that objection and told her to redact the name.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And you're telling me you don't have the form of the reports with that redaction of these maps or whatever they are, with the names being redacted. Is that correct?
So I have it in email, but I'm asking for paper form so I can follow along.
Understood.
Yes,
All
that's
right.
exactly.
Thank you. So can you make copies for those?
I printed, I found all of them. If there's one that she's missing, I'm happy to do so and pull them up again. I printed them all this morning for her.
Counsel's suggesting she doesn't have them, so I just want to make sure she has
Of
them.
course, and that's not a problem. So, but they've all been turned over via email. This is all in there, the original copies as well that were provided.
Counsel does not have the ability to print something out in the courtroom now. She's asking counsel, Ms. Raven, Liberty's asking for a copy of it. Let's provide her a copy.
I'm happy to do so. I just need to know exactly which one she says she's missing and which one she says she has. I don't want to have to duplicate them if possible.
None of the documents she's published
So
since
just
testimony
do
started.
me a
has
courtesy,
been given
print
to me.
all of them out.
Okay.
All right?
Can we take a break while the jury's out?
We can, but can we finish this first?
Oh, yes, I thought you were
So
finished.
you're gonna make copies of all the documents.
So she has in her hand some of them already. So I just want to make sure I don't double print them
Just double print.
on that. So
You know,
she,
counsel's suggesting she doesn't have them, so let's just print them all.
okay, well, she does have some of those. Just want to make sure.
For the record,
I don't know, you're saying they're sent, counsel's suggesting she hasn't received those things. I just want her to get copies of it. I don't want your constant back and forth. Well, she has it, just give her the copies, that's it, it's easy. Just get her the copies. All right? Mr. Devens, you need a restroom break?
Sir.
All right, we're recessed, thank you.
you gave me this last moment, so you're going off the time, 7 and nothing on my.
A little bit of the relationship between the prosecutor and the defense attorney and the judge and how they're all kind of interplaying with each other. It seems that the defense attorney and the prosecutor in this case are really not getting along. There's not a lot of professional civility going on. And I think that you saw that kind of play out when the judge is just telling the prosecutor, she says she doesn't have the documents. Just print a copy of all the documents and give them to her. Yeah. That should have been it. That should have been the whole thing. But the back and forth just kind of shows that the prosecutor is just trying to show that the defense attorney is not being completely honest with the court, and it's unnecessary. It doesn't help the case at all. She should have just said, okay, judge, no problem.
Now, let me ask you this, Sonny. I want to go back to ballistics for a second. There are no murder weapons in this case. Prosecution doesn't have them. And we're not entirely sure if it was one weapon or multiple weapons. How is that something that could help the defense?
Because it says that the prosecution says this happens, but they don't have the evidence that these individuals had weapons. So that is questionable. Just like you said earlier, the other thing that's questionable is how did these two individuals who are accused of this particular crime not sustain any significant or no injuries at all if this was a drive-by shooting with random gunfire? I think this is going to say, well, there's no weapons, they can't prove it. How do they tie together those particular knots? This is a very interesting case.
All right, well, it is an interesting case. More to cover. They'll be back after that recess, but we have more to cover. Stay with us here on Law and Crime. We'll be right back right after this. back, everybody, and thanks for coming back to Law and Crime. The Broward County jurors are in a morning break in the trial of Florida versus Jamel Demons. This is the rapper better known as YNW Melly. He's accused of double murder for the 2018 shooting deaths of his two friends. And as we wait and want to go back to a little bit of what happened yesterday, where a detective with the Miramar Police Department took the stand. This is Jonathan Zeller. If you haven't seen this testimony, let's take a look.
Detective, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Where do you work?
I work at the Miramar Police Department
How long have you worked for the Miramar Police Department?
for 23 years.
What do you do for the Miramar Police Department?
I'm a detective in the homicide unit
And how long have you been in the homicide unit?
since 2009.
Prior to going into the homicide unit, what other hats have you worn for the Miramar Police Department?
Several. One in particular is the digital forensic examiner.
Okay. What is a digital forensic examiner?
So what I do is we'll stick with the cell phones or cellular phones or devices of that nature. I do the extraction and the analysis for it.
And when you're doing an extraction, can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what types of software or tools you use to do an extraction on a cellular telephone?
Okay, so what we use is a software and hardware from a company called Celebrate. And this is specific for conducting extractions of cellular devices.
And approximately how many different trainings have you taken in the use of Celebrate systems?
I've taken a few. Each of them consists of 40 hours of class training and exercises, and obviously the exam as well.
What about, have you taken training with the CAST team of the FBI?
I have.
Have you taken, you said you also do analysis of the cellular forensics or digital forensics. What do you mean by that?
So, depending on what type of case it is, I will actually do the extraction and I'll also do the examination of it, the analysis for it, and go through it and look for items that potentially could be considered evidence.
And in terms of to do the analysis part, what information do you need?
I need to know what the case.
In this case that we're here on today, Miramar Police Department Investigation 18-10.
I don't think we have color printers in the back of my office, so it's not something I can do regardless. Let's get back on the record. I understand, well, first of all, the record reflect the presence of the defendant, his counsel, assistant state attorneys. We're still waiting for the state to provide certain documents to defense counsel, i.e. some maps that were being used as demonstratives. Counsel sidebar suggested that she didn't have them. They were emailed to her, but she doesn't have hard copies, and Raven Liberty wants the hard copies. So I had instructed the state attorney to go ahead and do that, provide those hard copies, and that's in the works because the printer in the courtroom doesn't seem to be working. So while we're waiting on that, let's go back and talk about the discovery cutoff that counsel suggested he wants. What's the state's position on the discovery cutoff?
That if there is anything that counsel brings up with regards to the witness that suggests additional analysis or anything that can be done, that the state would do it on that.
So you're opposing?
Yes, Your Honor.
Anything else that you want to be heard on regarding this discovery cutoff?
No, Your Honor.
Anything the defense wants to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor. I just started to do some research, and quite frankly, I've only candidly found a case. It's in the 4th DCA, but it concerns a civil matter, and it speaks of the need for a discovery cutoff to avoid the very term I used, ambush and surprise, and that when a party conducts itself in a way as to ambush there to get the benefit of that. These trials, we understand, life goes on beyond trials. So the evidence that can be introduced into a trial should have some finite and determinable parameters. The notion that the state comes here and asks jurors to put somebody to death suggests that they have completed an investigation that warrants that co-signing, co-signature. To suggest that, okay, there are a lot of things that we could have done and we didn't do, and if you ask about them, we're going to go do it and introduce it while the proceedings ensue, is not only an ambush, but it's an insult to the process. They're saying that they have the evidence. Now, the state can get up there and say, hey, the defense is making some ridiculous cross-examination and we don't have everything because what we have is enough, which is when they bring an indictment of this nature, or any indictment, they're saying we have enough now, beyond a reasonable doubt. But what they cannot do is, as these proceedings go forward, continue to investigate and plug holes that we reveal to exist as the process goes on until this case goes to verdict. I'm not quite sure when this would end or how there is even a gatekeeping function of the court if there is no gate and there is no fence and there are no lines and no parameters of propriety. The state is making a representation by bringing this indictment that they are ready and they have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And if that proof beyond a reasonable doubt also includes areas of investigation that were not pursued, then they should explain to a jury why it was not pursued and why the failure to pursue it does not undermine their case. They don't get to keep plugging holes as the proceedings go forward. And so, as the Fourth Circuit said, that is ambush. And the purpose of, the Fourth DCA said that is ambush. And the purpose of a discovery deadline is to avoid surprise, avoid ambush, and a party that engages in that ought not to get the benefit of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hold on.
Just briefly, I would mention that defense hasn't yet to provide any reciprocal discovery, but alluded to some yesterday. that they were looking at Instagram posts and everything that had happened as recently as this week, but yet they have provided nothing to the state. So if there's any deadline of any sort that needs to be imposed on both parties.
Thank you. Oh, Council, my understanding is that's the way it works, is that it's not, Richardson violations apply to both sides, it doesn't apply to just one side. It's deadlines apply to both sides. And there's the obligation to that's not what we're talking about.
We apologize. The printers decided to start working. Let's work on it. I'm sorry.
I apologize. What I was saying is that the whatever obligations that are imposed would be applicable to both sides when there's a discovery cutoff or not. My thought is as to the discovery cutoff, you can keep investigating the case however you feel fit, and you're more than welcome to do that. However, that doesn't mean that anything you find can be used at trial as in evidence. This thing with Mr. Moretti, where when I'm out of town on vacation, you're asking the detective, or he's offering, I'm not really sure how it happened, to continue and run this through another process, and the defense doesn't know about it. The defense cross-examines Mr. Zellner, Officer Zellner, and is not aware that he's asking questions about other programs, because his understanding is there isn't any other program. But you know there's another program, they have access to it, and they've done it, you just don't have the results. That seems to me to be what the council's talking about. And that seems to me to be a Richardson violation. There's a discovery that's ongoing, you know about it, and you're not telling them about it until we're here in court. So as far as Detective Moretti is concerned, I think that's a discovery violation. And I'm finding it to be a discovery violation. I think the only way it can be cured is he's not going to testify about this second procedure that happened. That's not coming in. Same thing. If you want to keep investigating the case, you can do it. You can find exculpatory information. You may change your mind as to how you proceed with the case, and I don't have a problem. You can investigate whatever you want to investigate. But as far as using new discovery that you're coming in, I think a cutoff needs to be happened, because this is what's going on. We're going to have this. If you find something new, there's a whole, as counsel describes it, that then you try to find evidence to plug up the hole that's new discovery. The defense doesn't have an opportunity to depose the witness. The defense doesn't have an opportunity to do X, Y, and Z. And that's just not the way it should be. It shouldn't be done by surprise. So
it's clear this was not a new item. This was just this. All of the information was supposed to be identical.
You found it. You had a meeting with the detective in May when we're in hiatus because I'm on vacation. All right. You had a meeting with him in May after we picked a jury, and when we're ready to, or we're in the middle of jury selection. You picked it. You did it, and you said, well, he tells you. Or you ask him, do you have more programs to go ahead and provide the information, and you find out there's another program, and he runs the program, does a different download with something other than Cellbrite, and therefore you have more information. Don't make the defense aware of it. You hold that to yourself. You go ahead and put on a couple weeks of trial testimony, and then when it comes up after he in cross-examination points something out, you bring it up and say, well, by the way, I told him, the detective in our pretrial meeting, it came up and he has the program and we can use it and we're doing it, all right? And but you don't tell him about it. You just go ahead and hold it, keep it close to the vest yourself. Don't explain it to him, and then you say, when it comes up at trial, I say, what was it? I don't have the report yet. That's why I didn't turn it over to him, but didn't disclose it's coming. It seems to me that's not what's supposed to happen. Not supposed to happen, period. That's a discovery violation. Okay? So, as far as the Detective Moretti, and whatever other form he used, that's not coming in.
Okay.
All right? That's the sanction. If you have other information, other discovery that's in the works, you better share it with them, because right now, if you don't have it, they're not aware of it now. It's not coming in unless there's something extraordinary that pops up. And just because you know, you find out they have additional capabilities and you want to go retest something. That's not extraordinary on my way of thinking. I'm not familiar with what the case law says. It just seems to me that this is a fundamental fairness thing. You have evidence, you need to turn it over to them. If you didn't turn it over to them, you can't use it. That's really the basic.
Understood, Your Honor. And so everything has been turned over. That was the only item of which there was additional investigation done on to see if there was any other information or anything else that came out. It was reported to me that it was identical in terms of the information that was done through Gray Key versus Celebrite on that. So defense counsel is attacking the veracity of the Celebrite program on that. So with regards to that, that's the only reason why that would even be brought up. But if I understand there, so we can move forward on that. But I do want to address one other issue while we're outside the presence of the jury. Counsel keeps objecting to publishing of items that are already in evidence and making speaking objections. So just ask if Your Honor could address that specific issue, because the state can publish the items that are in evidence in the presentation of their case, and defense can object if there's something that has not been admitted or something to that effect. But in terms of the speaking objections and things like that, those are improper in front of the jury.
Thank you. All right, no speaking objections.
Understood.
When do you expect this documentation to come over?
I think the printer just started working.
And I provided it to Ms. Liberty.
Do you have those, Ms. Liberty?
Yes, confirmed, Judge.
All right, you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense?
Yes, sir.
Bring the jury in.
Jurors entering.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Please be seated. Let the record once again reflect the presence of the jury as well as the defendants, this counsel, the state attorneys. Our witness remains on the stand. Counsel, you can continue with your direct examination.
Okay, so we had left off, you were talking about the red phone and the blue phone. And just to remind the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what is the red phone number?
So it is listed at the top of the slide. It is 772-713-9807.
And then the blue phone number?
The blue phone number is 954-248-9081.
Okay, so going back, you have a little green box with the numbers 154129-11. What is that?
That is the name of the tower and the sector.
Okay. And the times that are listed below, what are those indicative of?
So there's a time that's it says 3:20 a.m. in blue, and it says 3:20 a.m. in red, and that is the time from the records that the blue phone and the red phone each respectively connected to that tower.
So based on what you're showing here, what can you tell us about where the blue phone and the red phone were at 3:20?
So generally in the area around New Era Studios.
Okay. As you're moving across the slide, what are we looking at?
So we see a series of towers that the red phone and or blue phone were observed by as they move from east to west. So you see there's a line of towers generally in this area, kind of along 595, down I-75, and then the last ones at the end of the slide are the west, kind of by the intersection, a tower that's near the intersection of Pines and US 27. The tower is 63035, sector 15, at 3:57 a.m. That tower saw each of these phones.
So I want to make sure it's clear when you're the 3:20 a.m. that's on the right side of the screen. Can you kind of show in order the way the towers are plotted?
Yeah, so I didn't know the time for each tower because then it would be just a mess of boxes on the slide. But generally, these towers in the northeast, and then sequentially or chronologically as time went on, these towers were used. This tower was used later, and that tower, and this tower, and that tower. And so as time went on, from 320 closer to 357, these towers were used.
And based on your training and experience, what does that tell you about how the phones were moving in relation to one another between 3:20 and 3:57 a.m.?
Yeah, so in my opinion, that's consistent with the devices moving generally together.
Okay. So you mentioned that there are some in which there is red and blue together. So I want to focus in. There's one here. It looks like at the intersection of Flamingo Road and I-75. And
Yes.
595 rather. The red with the blue. What does that mean when you have them overlaid like that?
So that tower saw both the red phone and the blue phone.
Okay. Is that at the same time or are they at separate times?
It could be either.
So going on to the phone of the 772-713-9807, what are we looking at this slide titled 3:47 a.m.?
So this is a plot of timing advanced data, and it shows that two data points basically from the engineering report. The tower 64337, sector 2, that's pointed south, recorded the red phone at two data points, one at 3:47:13 a.m., one at 3:47:24 a.m. And the measurement that went up was that phone at those times was 0.24 miles from the tower.
So you said it's two different times, but it's the same measurement. How do you explain that to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
That's just what the records recorded.
Okay. And in terms of by having two data points along, are they going to be in the same exact spot?
Well, I mean, it could be or it could not be. So the 0.24 miles from the tower is this red arc here. And I guess your question is the phone in the same spot or not? I don't know. Those are two data points close in time. They're separated by 11 seconds, so the phone certainly could be stationary. The phone could also be moving. For instance, at one point it could be here, and at the other point it could be there. They're both possibilities, and you can't determine for this thing.
And in terms of you don't have any cameras if it's stuck at a red light or anything like that?
I don't.
Okay. So that was the 772-713-9807 at 3:47 a.m. Okay. Moving on to the 772-713-9807 from 3:52 to 3:53 a.m. Could you explain what you're illustrating and the data shows on this slide?
Okay, so this shows two data points, both using the same tower and sector, tower 151, 685, sector 13. And the first data point is at 3:52:58 a.m.
Okay.
That's this arc here. That's 0.58 miles from the tower. And then 50 seconds later, at 3:53:48 a.m., the arc is 1.16 miles from the tower, this other arc.
And in terms of the distance between the two arcs, what is that amount?
It's a little bit over half a mile,
And the time frame in between those two arcs is how long?
about 50 seconds.
Based on the records and that you have, can you give information as to where that phone was along those arcs?
Based on the records that I have,
Yes. Based on other additional information that was provided to you, can you make a determination as to where it's more likely than not the phone was?
yes.
And where is that?
So the phone moved half a mile in 50 seconds. That's consistent with vehicle travel. It's too fast for a phone to run. That's 30 miles an hour. So there's a couple places that the phone could be logically. For instance, it could be going east to west on Pines. It could be going north to south on 184th. Those are both options. There's a data point that was provided to me. And that reason for this analysis was I was asked, hey, the detective recovered some video footage from Montessori Academy that he believed these devices might be in a vehicle that was seen driving by around this time. The detective asked, is the cell data consistent with these devices being in the vehicle? In my opinion, yes.
The data points that we're looking at, are those the only data points that exist in this case?
No, but these are the data points between 352 and 353.
No. So going on to now the 772, 713, 9807, and 954, 248, 9081. The 4 a.m. to 4:03 a.m. Can you describe what information is contained here?
So both phones are seen in the same tower and sector, tower 63035, sector 15, at 4 o'clock and 36 seconds. The blue phone was 1.45 miles from the tower. We have two data points on the red phone, one at 4 a.m. and 54 seconds, one at 4:03, 14 seconds. The red phone was reported being 1.5 miles from the tower and 1.45 miles from the tower.
So when we're looking at here, this purple area, why is that?
Because the red and blue phones are both, they are red and blue mixed purple, so.
Just in case anyone's colorblind. So, with regards to the locations along this arc, can you narrow down in any way where the phones are along that arc?
Now, from the cell records, all you can tell is that they're somewhere within. Yeah.
And in terms of if you're looking at it in the totality of the circumstances based on the other records and information that you have, can that help and assist you in rendering an opinion as to where the phones are located?
Yes.
And where would that be?
So, the red flag depicts the crime scene that the detectives told me about, and they asked, is it possible for these devices to have been in the crime scene? In my opinion, yes. The data is consistent with these devices being in the area of the crime scene at this time.
Okay. So going on to the 772, 713, 9807 phone at 4:06 a.m. What information or data are you showing here?
So this shows the red phone at 4:06:22. There's a data point where it's back on tower 63047, sector 3. It's 1.02 miles from the tower. So in this band here.
Okay, and in terms of where it is along that band, can you give a more definitive answer?
From the cell phone records alone, no. The reason for this slide, this analysis, was because the detective had video footage from Montessori Academy again at a certain time.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Sorry, repeat your question.
So based on these records, can you say where the phone was along that band?
And your objection is it calls for hearsay?
That wasn't the same question, Judge.
Thank you. Proceed. You can answer the question.
So based on these records, can you say where along the band it was?
No.
Was other physical evidence provided for you to review?
I don't think I saw physical evidence, no.
Oh. So going on to the next slide, the 772, 713, 9807, and 954, 248, 9081. If you can explain what we're looking at on this particular slide.
So this is a series of data points on 3 different hours for both the red and blue phone between 4:17 and 4:23. We're starting back on the left side of the slide. where 417.43, the blue phone, is 1.21 miles from this tower. Shortly after that, at 4:18:02 a.m., the red phone is 0.87 miles from the tower. Shortly after that, 4:20:50 a.m., the blue phone is 1.02 miles from this tower. Then after that, at 4:23:22 and 4:23:55 a.m., the red phone is 0.29 miles and then 0.68 miles from this tower.
Okay, and in terms of what can you tell about how the phones are related in distance from one another based on this slide?
Distance from one another. Well, both phones moved north and then east. We know that the blue phone and the red phone are both over here, and now they're over here at the end of the period.
Can you have an opinion as to whether or not they separated during this time frame?
During this time frame?
Yes, 4:17 to 4:23.
I don't know. To me, I don't think there's enough data here to form.
Okay. So going on to the blue phone, 954-248-9081, 4:40 a.m. to 5:52 a.m. What data points and what information do you have on that phone?
So there's a lot of data points, or many data points for the blue phone during this time period. All the timing advance bands were either 0.82 or 0.87 miles from the tower, Tower 62492, Sector 3. Each of those bands, the 0.82 miles and 0.87 miles are shown here.
Okay. Does that phone then, that's all the data that you have for that particular blue phone?
Right.
Okay. Now to go to the 4:40 a.m. for the 772-713-9807, where does your data show that phone to be in the area of?
So at 4:40 a.m., at this point, the phones are clearly separate. At 4:40 a.m., we have two different types of data points that were plotted here. At 4:40:31, we have the timing advance data, which shows that the phone is 0.58 miles from this tower. And then at 4:40:34 a.m., the red phone makes an outgoing call using that cell site for that tower in Sector 62407, Sector 12.
Okay, and the outgoing phone call that is made, is that identified from the records?
Yes.
And what is that? Sorry.
That is a outgoing call to phone number 954-376-9158.
Okay. Does the red phone ever coincide again with the blue phone on the same arc that covers the hospital?
No.
So that was the first analysis that you did. Did you do additional ones?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to move on to the sprint records and analysis that you did. Council, you're clear which one? So with the sprint records that you were given, did you have the same measurement or distance data for those phones?
No, we had a similar report, which is the time in advance. Sprint calls it per call measurement data report. It's formatted differently. It's a different network, it's a different company, but it has generally the same types of information contained in the report.
Okay. If there was going to be a distance in this report, where would it be shown?
It would be shown in column I.
Column I?
Yeah, just titled distance in miles.
Distance miles there. Okay. And to be clear, we're looking at the records here for 954-371-7895. Did Sprint provide the distance for column I at any point between 3 a.m. and 357 unit. Sorry, that's column 163. Was there any distance provided?
No.
Okay. The 164 column, or row 164, row 60, 166, 167, and 169 was distance provided by Sprint at that point.
Yes.
Are they from a different manufacturer or vendor of cell tower?
Yes.
Okay. So based on, and so on this, the state would also publish what's been previously admitted as State 63. And for the record, that is the 2018-221418-6155597 customer service management screen of Chris Thomas. And the second one to be is published is the customer service management screen of Duntavius.
That's the objection.
May we approach?
Sure.
And so now also publishing the 2018-221418-6155640 records that have been previously admitted into Sprint and previously admitted as part of State 63. Special Agent Collins, the number that you're looking at here on the screen, 772-713-2341. Did you do analysis for those records?
Yes.
Okay. And again, for the record, publishing the subscriber information previously admitted as State 63 for Chris Thomas. Going down to the next phone number, did you do a cellular analysis for the phone number 954-371-7895?
Yes.
And for the record, publishing what's been previously admitted as State 63 with an identified subscriber of Dontavius Withers. Okay. On the Sprint records, do you do substantially the same type of analysis that we talked about on the true call data analysis?
Yes.
Okay. And do you use the same information to illustrate cell sites and cell sectors and
Yes.
towers?
Yes.
Okay. So again, the same demonstrative that's on what's labeled as page 3, you're still using the same symbols, the circle to represent a tower?
Yes.
Okay. Are you still using the same wedge or pie shape to identify a specific cell site?
Yes.
As to the next image that we're looking at, what does this show?
This shows the Sprint network in South Florida in the time of October 2018.
Does this fairly and accurately depict how the cell towers for Sprint were situated in October of 2018?
Yes.
And we previously discussed the locations of interest. Are those the same as in the previous analysis that you did?
Yes.
Why don't you put these all on one giant map together?
All the phones?
Yes.
Well, one, it would be a lot of phones. It could be like confusing. to look at to see all the different downloads. And then, so that was one of the reasons why.
Oh. So going on to the phone number, the 772-713-2341, the green phone on this, and 954-371-7895. Can you explain what we're looking at of this October 26th, 3:22 to 3:43 a.m.?
So, much like the red and the blue phone, this shows that the green and the purple phone both use towers or seen by towers in the Fort Lauderdale area near the flag with the NE represents New Era Studios. At 3:22 a.m., the purple tower is seen by Sprint Tower 168845, and then at 3:23 a.m., the green phone by a different tower, 325-911.
Okay. And in terms of, to go back to the 772-713-9807 and 248-9081, you're showing the same or similar time frames?
Yes.
Okay. Do the phones, the green and the purple phone, move consistently together during this time frame?
During this time frame, yes.
Okay. And how can you say that?
The towers, again, advancing chronology, consistent with the phones moving together, generally south, and then west, and then south again. They were hitting the same towers, similar times, through this point.
Moving on to now 3:43 to 3:57 a.m. What are you showing and illustrating on this slide?
So this is only the purple phone. And you'll see that there are several towers that saw the purple phone during this time period. Unfortunately, because we didn't get distance information in the report, we can't tell where, in relation to those towers, this device is. So you'll see that there's overlap between the towers, right? Like for instance, between 3:43 and 3:52, there were multiple times that this tower saw the phone. But during that time period, this tower also saw the phone at 3:48. During that time period, this tower also saw the phone at 3:49. 3:50, this tower saw it. So we have multiple towers from all different locations where the antennas are generally pointing that direction that saw the phone, but we don't have distance information.
Are there any phone calls or anything that would indicate that the phone used one of those towers as the clearest, strongest signal to make a phone call?
No.
Then going on to the 772-713-2341. Is this using some of the same towers?
Some of them.
Okay, and if we can just kind of go back and forth a little bit to explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury which ones are the same and which ones are different.
Sure. So I believe all three of these are the same, but the purple ones, or the purple phone, had multiple other towers that were used.
Okay. To look at tower 336-234-3. I'm trying to overlay them as, are they using the same antenna on that tower?
No.
Okay. Is this consistent with the phones being together?
No, in my opinion, this shows that the phones were separated.
So, and then in terms of the final analysis at 3:49 a.m., if you could, for the 772-713-2341 tower, if you could identify that on this exhibit, which is page 9.
The tower that recorded the phone at 3:49?
Yes.
It's this one in the center, tower 336-0972.
Okay. And then in terms of the final tower, the 3:57 a.m., if you could identify that one.
It's the western edge of the map area, tower 336-234, sector 3.
Okay. So going on to the third analysis you did in this case. Did you do an analysis again for the phone number 772-713-9807 the red phone, and 954-376-9158.
Yes.
And in terms of the 954-376-9158, is that the same phone number you testified to was the phone call at 4:40 a.m. and on the 772 phone?
Yes.
Okay. So going on to those, do you again use the same information to depict timing advance and cell sites and everything of that nature?
Yes.
The two phones, is it important to know what network a phone is on before you do the mapping?
Yes.
Okay. Were both of these phones on the same network?
Yes.
On this particular one, what network were both phones on?
T-Mobile.
Okay, so back to the red phone. I know these, again, fairly accurately depict the location of the T-Mobile towers of October of 2018.
Yes.
Same locations of interest, or is there an additional one on this particular item?
There's an additional one.
And what item or additional location is on this map that is different from the others?
The Toscana Apartments, 5700 Toscana Lane, Margate, Florida. It's shown with on the map with an orange flag with a white letter T on it.
And if you could just circle it so it's clear to the general jury where that's at.
Here's on the map. Here's the actual location.
Everything else remains the same?
Yes.
Okay. So on the 954-376-9158, the kind of turquoise phone, what information are you showing from 1:08 a.m. to 8:23 a.m.?
So this is information from the call detail records, not engineering data. This is calls and texts. And it shows that between 1:08 a.m. and 8:23 a.m., there are several calls and texts that the phone, to and from the phone, using two different sectors of the same tower, shown here with two different wedges.
And so based on your training experience, do you have an opinion as to where that phone was from 1:08 to 8:23 a.m.?
Yeah, so generally in the area, it's kind of apartments.
Moving on to October 26, 2018, from 12:01 p.m. to 12:12 p.m. on this turquoise phone, the 954-376-9158. What information are you mapping here?
So here we're showing both the engineering data, the time in advance information, as well as information from the call detail records. So first, 12:01 and 12:02, the phone, turquoise phone, is in these two bands here. First, this one is a little closer to the tower, it's 0.63 miles away, and then the second band is 0.73 miles from the tower. During that time period also, at 12:01:39, the turquoise phone places an outgoing call to the red phone, 9807.
So then the next time frame that you're mapping on this location is what?
It's 12:05, when the time in advance measurement that's recorded is 1.02 miles from this tower, south of it.
Okay. Going on to 12:06:07 to 12:12:37.
So during that time frame, there's measurements from two different sectors of the same tower. So we see on the one hand that there's arcs here that are either 1.45 and 1.5 miles from the tower.
Okay.
But also during that time period, we have measurements from a different side of that tower. They're 1.5 and 1.55 miles from the tower.
Okay, and in terms of the location, is there anything you can say with specificity as to where that phone was at 12:07?
No, I mean, I think that I would generally look for the phone to be someplace where the arcs are overlaid, or an area where it would be seen by both sectors, but no, you can't in isolation.
Do the cell phone towers overlap in their sectors?
Yes, they do.
Oh. Going on to October 26, 12:14 to 12:20 a.m., the 954-376-9158 phone number, the turquoise phone. What are we looking at in this image?
So, starting down here, south on US 27, or excuse me, the tower near the area of Pines of US 27, pointed south. At 12:14, 14 p.m., the band is 1.45 miles from the tower. Then a few seconds later, it's 1.21 miles from the tower. It's getting closer. A few seconds later, it's 0.97 miles from the tower. And then 0.48 miles from the tower. Then it's in this band on a different sector, but perhaps still close to the tower, traveling the same direction, 0.63 miles. And then to the north, 1.1 and 1.6 miles from the tower.
And so in terms of the north to south distance of each of these bands, how wide are they? If we're looking at the north to south, aspect between here and here, what type of, remind ladies and gentlemen, what, is this still on a 4G phone?
Yes, yeah, so each of those arcs is still 78 meters deep.
Okay. Based on the multiple locations that you have, do you have an opinion as to how that phone or handset was traveling?
Yeah, I think the data is consistent with the phone traveling south and north during that time.
Now going on to the 772-713-9807 between 12:01 and 12:12 p.m. on October 26th of 2018. What are you illustrating with this particular image?
So at 12:01, first there's an incoming call from the turquoise phone 9158, and then at 12:01, the red phone is in this band, 0.92 miles from the tower. At 12:03, it's 0.68 miles from the tower. At 12:05, it's 0.92 miles from the tower. And then 12:07 to 12:12, it's 1.55 miles from the tower.
Okay, and just to flip back again to the 12:01 to 12:12 for the 954-376-9158. In terms of, can you make any opinions as to where these two phones were located in relation to one another during these time frames?
So they're in the same general geographic area for sure, right? They're both on the same tower, at the same time, near Pines and US 27. There's areas where there's times when their bands are approximately the same, and there's times where they're different as well.
Okay. Can you make any sort of opinion that they were in the same vehicle?
No.
Going on to the 772-713-9807 phone from October 26, 2018, from 12:14 p.m. to 12:21 p.m. What data are you illustrating in this particular slide?
So the first data point, 12:14:47, is this band here. It's 1.02 miles from this tower. The next one, 12:16:28, is this band here, 0.92 miles from the tower. Then continuing on in time, at 12:18:08 p.m., the red phone's in this band, 0.92 miles from the tower. And then at 12:18:28, 0.68 miles from the tower. And then finally at 12:21:17, it's 0.29 miles from this tower.
And in terms of that was the end of the mapping and cellular analysis that you were asked to do in this case?
Yes.
Do all of the maps fairly and accurately represent your testimony that you just gave?
Yes.
In terms of, we talked a little bit about cell phone signal and things like that. Does being in a parking garage or being at elevation change your analysis of where the phones would be?
Being a part of the elevation change. I mean, I don't think so. No.
If there was something that was a red flag in the data, what do you do to catch that?
If I see a red flag for whatever reason, something that doesn't make sense, I'm going to look at it much more closely and try and figure out, okay, what is the issue? Is there an issue?
Was there any such information or issues that in the records that you looked at in this case?
No.
Can you ever say why a phone picks a particular tower or doesn't pick a different one?
Yes. So if we're talking about making a call or sending a text, and then from the call detail records, the phone picks the tower based on its readings of signal strength and signal quality. The phone always picks the tower with the clearest, strongest signal. If we're talking about the engineering data, what the network sees, why the network reports the distance measurement from one tower instead of another, no, I don't know why.
Oh. In terms of, can you tell whether or not a specific tower was working on the evening in question?
If there's a record associated with that tower, it was working on the evening.
There's other mapping software that's available. Does the FBI use a specific mapping software when doing this?
Yeah, we have a couple different programs. I used one program.
Okay, and what is that?
ESPA.
What is that specifically?
ESPA is a program for cell site backup.
Why do you use that specific program?
It's the tool, one of the tools that we have, and they meet our needs or requirements as an agency.
In terms of just plugging the latitude and longitude into Google Maps, is that something you can testify to based on those records?
Yes.
And do you use that and those latitude and longitude that are in that timing advance data to determine where the phone was?
So I didn't use the latitude longitude to produce that report. Could I use them? Could I plot them in ESPA or Google Maps and look at them? Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Why don't you rely on them?
I don't rely on them when I'm doing my expert testimony because I don't understand all the factors that go into the network driving that estimated location for the device. For investigative leads or something, if I'm looking for a kid, of course I'm making my report for expert testimony. I use the timing advance bands to understand the math.
And in terms of, is the math constant?
Yes.
Do you take into account, you mentioned the UTC time versus local time. Do you take that into account in all the records when you're looking at those?
Yes.
Does the power of the antenna or cell site affect your analysis on the speed of light and the distance from the tower for each cell phone?
No.
Okay. Can you explain what is tower loading?
Tower loading. Like when a tower gets overloaded?
Correct.
Okay. So towers have, finite capacity. There's, not unlimited network resources for a phone company. So generally, you're able to make calls or text whenever you want, right? Like towers generally don't get overloaded, but it is possible for towers to get overloaded. So the way you'd see that, I guess, would be one, if you're trying to make a call. If you've ever experienced the phenomenon where you're looking at your phone, like say this would have to be an event where there's a ton of phones, like an unexpected, unanticipated influx of devices and people, like say the Super Bowl or something like that, and there's just an incredible demand for network resources. Everybody's trying to Facebook Live or make calls, take video, everything. So if you've ever been in a situation where you're looking at your phone and you see, man, I had like great service, I have 4 bars, but I try and place a call, and the call just won't go through. It's because the towers might, it could be because the towers are loaded, you just can't handle your call.
Okay, and in terms of, would that be something that the phone would be able to see in the phone records?
So if the tower is overloaded, the phone won't know that it's overloaded, right? The phone can't see or doesn't have a view into what the network is handling, which is why your phone has identified a particular antenna as the one that offers the clearest, strongest signal. It says you've got 4 bars from this antenna, this is the one I'm connected to. It doesn't know that that antenna is overloaded, and so that's why when you have 4 bars, you hit send to try to make a call, the call just doesn't connect, it just won't go through. The phone doesn't know, oh, I should be looking for an extra antenna someplace. All it knows is that's my antenna.
And if there's no records or no entry in the records, can you analyze any of that data?
No, obviously I only am able to analyze the data that I have data points for.
In terms of the mapping and everything that you created, is it a fair and accurate depiction of the cell phone data and records that you just testified to?
Yes.
Does it in terms of as you're creating it, are you creating it as an expert in cell phone data and mapping?
Yes.
Do you do validation and verification of the data and the information that you're relying on?
So, through my training experience, I know that the time in advance data is very accurate. And we talked about that earlier or yesterday, where it's like have real life validation for it. Like, yes, I've done historic cell site analysis. I've validated by finding the phone in the place where I expect it to be, or seeing video of the person with the device at that point in time.
All right. Fair enough. We may approach time clock.
Breaks, so we're going to take a short recess, do not discuss the case, not form any opinion about the case, don't allow anyone to discuss the case with presence or research. Please no page on your chairs, we'll be back in shortly. Thank you. Thank you. Let the order reflect the jury step down. Counsel remain. All with the defendant and our witness. Yes, counsel, I'm sorry. I just figured it was easier if we just let the jury go.
Understood. Yes,
Makes
sir.
sense. Your Honor, may we have this discussion just in case there needs to be some supplementation testimony outside the presence of the court?
Sure. You can step outside.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Special Agent Collins has left the courtroom. Yes, sir. He wants an issue yet?
Well, he's got to use the restroom.
Who does?
Defendant.
Sure. We'll take a we'll be in recess.
I
That's
provide
arranged
case,
for a restroom break for Mr. Dennis.
and I provide a case officer of the court and counsel on the admissibility of the demonstrative exhibit that appears the state.
Thank you. I'll take a look at it.
The two phones, is it important to know what network a phone is on before you do the mapping?
Yes.
Okay. Were both of these phones on the same network?
Yes.
On this particular one, what network were both phones on?
T-Mobile.
Okay, so back to the red phone. I know these, again, fairly and accurately depict the location of the T-Mobile towers of October of 2018.
Yes.
Same locations of interest, or is there an additional one on this particular item?
There's an additional one.
And what item or additional location is on this map that is different from the others?
The Toscana Apartments, 5700 Toscana Lane, Margate, Florida. It's shown with on the map with an orange flag with a white letter T on it.
And if you could just circle it so it's clear